Well, good evening. Good to see everybody here. They say that no English dictionary has ever been able to fully distinguish between the words complete and finished. But there was one scholar, a gentleman, who decided that he would make an attempt to distinguish between those two words. So here's what he said. If you marry the right woman, you're complete. But if you marry the wrong woman, you're finished. And then he even went on to say, if you marry a woman who loves to shop, you're completely finished. Well, after tonight, we're going to be completely finished with this series of lessons. And I just want to kind of echo what Debbie said under prayer. I want to thank Heritage again for giving us an opportunity to do this. And thank Superwoman, Jan Wright, for all she's done to make it happen, and so many others. And thank you for being here so faithfully every week. And I've been so blessed by the opportunity, and I hope you have as well. As you can see, I have a different mic tonight, and so we're just keeping our fingers crossed that this is going to be a little better than last week, and that you can hear me a little more clearly without the echo. And we kind of had an adventure with our mics through these 4 weeks. And I couldn't help but be reminded of this story that I heard one time about a lady who was introducing a woman at a ladies' event. And she had her microphone on the stand like this, and she kept having trouble with it. It kept falling down. And so she'd say something, and she'd pull it back up, and it'd fall down again. And that kind of went on through the whole introduction. And so finally, when she finished, she turned to sit down, and she stopped for a minute and thought, and she turned back to the audience, and she said, I probably ought to tell you one more thing. I think our speaker has a screw loose. So you may have come to that conclusion already during these 4 weeks about your speaker, but anyway, I hope not. And I do appreciate so much all your kind remarks about the things that we've been talking about. All right, is Ashley here to help me if I hit the wrong button? All right, so we're ready to go. I didn't know I'd have to call on you this soon. I can start without it.
What size batteries does it take?
Here we go. She's magic and she's my cousin. Okay, so most of you probably remember the story about the Pied Piper, right? It's a story that's based on an old German fable about a piper who helps a little village get rid of their rat population by enticing the rats to follow his music out of town, okay? And of course, the problem arises when the people of the village don't want to pay him for his services, and so he lures their children out in the very same manner, okay? Well, back in the 70s, when my husband and I were in college, he was part of an improvisational group at Freed Hardeman that performed for children called the Pied Pipers, okay? And I was really tempted tonight to put a picture of him up there in this really brightly colored one-piece suit that they had to wear, kind of like a jumpsuit actually, but I knew that was really embarrassing, so I didn't. But if you know him and you see him, tell him that I did, okay? But anyway, and for the record, I have to say that he was probably the best big bad wolf they ever had in that performance. But anyway, they also, the Pipers at Freed Hardeman also had another act that was part of their performance that they did, and it was called Let's Go on a Bear Hunt. Now, some of y'all have probably heard that and may be familiar with it. It's kind of like you have a leader, and then everybody else echoes what the leader says. You know, let's go on a bear hunt. Let's go on a bear hunt. All righty, let's go. And then you have all of these different actions that you do, where you go like, I don't know, through a swamp and through the woods and through a meadow, and the key line is, and it always is, can't go around it, can't go over it, let's go through it. And then there you go, swish, 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 and you get bitten by chiggers and you get chased by a bull, and it's lots of fun for the kids, of course, because it isn't real. Well, fact of the matter is, in life, we have to go through a lot of challenges that aren't nearly as much fun because it is real. And wouldn't it be great if we could just go around them, or get away from them or avoid them altogether? But that's not the case, is it? We have to go through them. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, as we try to pull together all the things that we've been talking about over the past few weeks. That's the question. How? How do we make it through when the times are hard? And so I've got 6 suggestions that I want to give you tonight as we look at that. And this is going to be the very first one. Don't quit at halftime. Now, recently there's a fella that's been in the news that you may have heard about. A guy by the name of Vontae Davis, who did this very thing. He was a football player that in college, I think, played for Illinois. He went on to be drafted in 2009 by the Miami Dolphins, played a while for the Colts, and this year was playing for the Buffalo Bills. Well, Sunday before last, September the 6th, after playing the first 2 quarters of the game, he went in the dressing room, changed his clothes, and told his teammates that he wasn't going back out on the field anymore. He was done. Not just done for that game, not just done for the day, but he was done. He wasn't going to play anymore. He quit at halftime. Now, I don't know what reasons motivated him to do that. But you know what? No matter who we are, I think it's very easy sometimes to get discouraged, isn't it? Especially when we're dealing with these hardships. And we may even be tempted to quit, to just hang up our cleats and go home and never look back. And you've probably known people who have done that when they've had a hardship. They've left the Lord and left the church. But did you know that we have an example in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of one of God's own prophets who became so discouraged that he almost did this? He wanted to quit at halftime. He wanted to just walk away. So if you have your Bibles, I hope you'll turn back to the passage that Debbie read for us already, and I appreciate you doing that. 1 Kings chapter 19, and while you're getting there, I have to tell you about something that happened to our family one time. Several years ago, it was after church on a Sunday morning, and so we were going to leave church and go with some friends of ours out to eat at Ryan's. So that tells you it's been a while, right? So anyway, we get there, and we go in, and so in a little bit, the waitress comes over to take our drink orders, and we tell her what we want to drink. And of course, we've already gotten our food because we've gone, around the buffet. And so all we need is our drinks. And so we're sitting there, we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. We finally start eating, and we're almost through with our food, and we still don't have any drinks. And finally, this other young woman comes over, and she's so apologetic, and she says, "Well, I am so sorry, but said your waitress quit." And I don't know if we just overwhelmed her that much. I mean, there were 8 kids in the group maybe, so that may explain it. I don't know. Sometimes things are just too much to take, I guess. But it's funny, anytime we're ever in a restaurant now and our waitress is kind of slow, we'll look at each other and say, "Well, I hope she didn't quit." But that waitress that day may have felt like Elijah in 1 Kings 19. He became very discouraged. And you see from there in the first verse, the reason that he became discouraged was because he listened to the wrong voice. And we do that sometimes, don't we? There's this old story I like to tell about a lady that came home from the mall one day with a dress that she had bought, and it was pretty expensive. When her husband looked at the price tag, he said, "What were you thinking? Well, we can't afford something that's expensive." And she said, "Well, I really don't know what happened. It's like one minute I was just in the store looking at this dress on the rack, and the next thing I knew, I was in the dressing room trying it on." She said, "It's as if the devil was right there whispering in my ear, this dress would look great on you." Well, her husband said, "You're a Christian. Why didn't you just say, 'Get behind me, Satan'?" And she said, "I did, only he said it looks great from back here too." So sometimes we listen to the wrong voices, don't we? And that's exactly what Elijah did, because we see in chapter 19 and verse 1 that he listened to the voice of Jezebel, wicked Queen Jezebel. And she was making threats against him, threats that made him tremble in his boots. Or, I don't know if he wore boots, maybe tremble in his sandals, but he was trembling anyway. Look at verse 4. "But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, and said, 'It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers.'" That's how low he was. He was ready to die. He was begging God to take away his life. And like we said, we can sometimes get that low when we're just overcome by our troubles. Not only that, but look in verse 10. So he said, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and now they seek to take my life." Okay. Not only was he ready to die, but he says, "I feel so alone. Nobody knows what I'm going through. Nobody understands." And sometimes we have those same feelings too. At this point, I think Elijah had just narrowed down his world to where he only saw one person, and that was himself. And so he is overcome with depression. But what I want to do now, I want us to look and notice just what God does for him in this situation. And the beautiful thing is that I think God will do the same thing for us when we hit those low points in our life. So here we go. First of all, you'll notice that God fed him, and secondly, he let him sleep. And I mentioned these first two together because I think they go hand in hand with one another. Sometimes when you're in the midst of a storm, a really trying time in your life, you don't even take the time to meet the basic needs of your body, do you? Have you ever been there? Maybe you're busy taking care of somebody else, so you don't really have time for yourself. Or maybe it's impossible for you to rest because for the first time in decades, you're sleeping alone because you've lost your spouse. Or maybe you're having to eat meals alone when you've been used to eating them with your spouse. And then there may be the occasion that you are just so anxious about things that are going on in your life with your children or with a certain situation that even when you try to eat, you just can't even hardly swallow it down. We've all probably been there for times like that. You can't sleep at night because you're so overcome with worry. Ladies, we have to take care of our physical bodies, and I think God knew that. And I don't know what a broom tree is, but I know that that's what Elijah lay under and he slept. And then he ate, and I do know what hot cake is. He ate hot cake, and I can identify with that. And then after he ate, he slept some more. So that was taking care of his physical body, and that's important to do when we're down and discouraged. There's a friend of mine who says that the best advice that she got from anybody after she lost her husband was from another woman who was also a widow, and this is what she told her. She said, "You need to pamper yourself." And she had been in a cramped hospital room for weeks on end, and she said, "I want you to go, and I want you to get a massage, and I want you to go to the chiropractor if you do that. I want you to go get a pedicure, get you a manicure too. You need to take care of yourself." Ladies, I think as the female gender, we get so busy sometimes taking care of other people, our families, that we neglect ourselves. And so this shows, I think, that it's important to take care of your physical body. And then next, I want you to notice number 3, that Elijah spent some time in contemplation on the Mount of God. And I love the section in this chapter, verses 11 through 13, where it talks about there was a whole lot going on around Elijah. There was an earthquake, and there was wind, and there was fire. And I was reading this today, and I thought, earth, wind, and fire, that sounds like a rock group, doesn't it? But you know, God wasn't in any of those things. Where was God? Do you remember? He was in that still, small voice. A gentle whisper is how another version puts it. And ladies, I think that's just a good reminder to us that sometimes we need to get away from the rat race. You know, Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." And sometimes that's what it takes, being still and being quiet to see God. There's a place you can go and enjoy the beauties of nature. You know, we probably all have our favorites, but go to that place every time you can. You know, drive along the Natchez Trace during autumn. Get up early one morning and watch the sunrise, or go down by the river and watch the sunset. Go to a botanical garden. Go out at night and just look up and see all the stars. Take in the majesties around you, but don't stop there. Reflect on the one who made all these things. And I think that's so important. That restores our spirit in the same way that food and sleep can restore our physical body. Okay, and so then, number 4, God gave Elijah some work to do. You know, the best way to get the focus off of yourself is to do something for somebody else. And especially for somebody who is less fortunate than you are. And we have so many opportunities, ladies, for that if we'll just take advantage of it. I have a good friend that volunteers at one of the elementary schools in our area. And y'all, some of the things she's told me, I just can hardly believe. For example, a few weeks ago, they had a PTA meeting one night, and so she volunteered to come and help, and they set her up at a table in the foyer with T-shirts to sell. They had these little $5 T-shirts, had the name of the school on there, and the kids could have them to wear on field trips or just have them to wear to school. I mean, where can you buy a shirt for $5, right? You know, she said she sat there that entire evening and only sold 3 T-shirts because there were only 3 families that had enough money to spare to buy a $5 T-shirt. And then last week, they had their book fair, so she volunteered to work in the library, and she said it was the saddest thing because out of every class that came through that day, there might be one child whose parents had given them some money to buy a book. And y'all, my friends, her children went to private schools, and she said it wasn't unusual when there was a book fair for kids to come to school with $100 to spend at the book fair. So there are so many families and children in need right here in our community around us. And so I challenge you to find something to do to get involved with other people, and that will boost you during your low times. And then finally, God encouraged Elijah by telling him that others would help him. You know, contrary to what he thought, he wasn't all alone. But if you look at verse 18, what God says, "Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all those whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." There are a lot of people out there, and God will use those people to encourage us, during our low times, okay? And sometimes I think that that's so hard for us to accept help from other people. I think as Christians and as women, we're better at giving sometimes than we are at receiving. But when we're going through these hard hands that we're dealt, it's important to let other people help us. It's a blessing to them, and it'll be a blessing to us as well. Okay, so that's my first suggestion. Don't quit at halftime. Don't get discouraged like Elijah. And then number 2, remember the way you handle adversity is a testament to others about your faith. Now, I don't know if anybody in here knows Chinese. I kind of hope not, because I hope this is the right symbol. I found it on the internet. But I've always heard that the Chinese symbol for crisis is a combination of 2 other symbols. The symbol for danger, which is on the left, and the symbol for opportunity, which is on the right. And I've always thought that was so interesting, because I believe that with every crisis that comes our way in our lives, we do have an opportunity to use it to the glory of God, if we will. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I gave you the example of the young man who was embezzling funds from his employer to support his addiction. You know, and I told you about how he went to rehab, and now he has become such a great resource for people in our area that are going through addiction. And so I think that's a great example of using a trial to the glory of God. If you read my book, Playing the Hand You Dealt, you remember the story about my friend Gwen, who was severely burned in a fire when she was only 7 years old. Well, that's the first part of Gwen's story, but I want to tell you a second part of her story tonight. And I'm going to read you it's an excerpt from a newspaper article that was written in a newspaper, in a North Carolina newspaper when Gwen was an adult. And it's written by Susan Reinhardt. She says, one afternoon on her way out of town, Gwen Clifford and her family stopped at a local Burger King for a quick lunch. She was in her usual good mood, laughing and chatting openly with the young man taking her order. She never saw the sad girl who watched her from a distance. She never saw that teenager's pained eyes or shocked expression, an expression that seemed to ask, how can this woman be so happy? The girl watching her was planning to kill herself that afternoon. But when she saw Gwen's scars, saw her missing fingers, saw the joy in a face that had to be rebuilt by surgeons, she changed her mind. It was an odd coincidence that the girl with the death wish happened to be someone that Gwen's friend was helping. Not long after the incident, Gwen received a call. Were you in Burger King on such and such a day? She remembers her friend asking her. It was then she learned of the girl who had stood in the background watching and analyzing. She had come home that day describing the burned woman and her apparent happiness and saying, well, if she can be happy, then surely so can I. And I thought that was so awesome. I've always loved a quote by a man by the name of Henry Wingblade. And listen to what he says. The Christian personality is hidden within us. It is unseen, like soup carried in a tureen high over a waiter's head. No one knows what's inside unless the waiter is bumped and he trips. And so what happens to us ladies when life trips us up, when life gives us those bumps? In Gwen's case, what came spilling out of her was something that had a tremendous impact on a young lady who saw her. You know, author Philip Yancey says, your heart is revealed and your character is forged when life does not turn out the way that you had planned. Number 3, I would say let your hardships cause you to depend more on God. And there's a passage, we want to take the time to look it up, in Matthew chapter 3, verses 11 and 12. John the Baptist is talking about Jesus. He's talking about the Messiah. And there's a phrase in it that has always puzzled me because it says, his fan is in his hand. And I never really knew what that meant. Not the kind of fan like we use, when the thermostat's not set the way we like it. But people who are familiar with the way they did farming in Bible times tell us that the fan was a type of winnowing fork, which is kind of like we might call a pitchfork, okay? And so they used it with their wheat. After the farmer had cut his wheat, then he had the job of trying to separate the wheat, the good part, from the chaff, which was the bad part. And so what he would do is he would take that fan or that winnowing fork and do pretty much like they're doing there with the bowls, just throw it up in the air. And the wind would blow away the chaff, but the heavy part, the kernels of grain, would fall at the feet of the farmer. And so I think that's a great illustration as we think about what are we going to do when the harsh winds blow. We may have terrible winds of trouble. We may have light breezes of doubt that come our way. But are we going to get blown away, like we talked about earlier, leave the Lord, leave our Savior, leave the church, or are those trials going to cause us to fall at the feet of our Master? And then next, number 4, and I think this follows right along with that, the idea of falling at the feet of our Master. I would encourage us to pray more. I'm a firm believer in the power of prayer. And I want to give you a personal example of that. And I know some of you have heard me tell this story before. So our oldest daughter, Anna, is the third of our children, but she was the first one to get married. She got married back in 2006. And you know how it is, you kind of plan your life the way you think it's going to happen. We all do, I guess. And so she and Craig had been married for a couple of years, and they decided that they were ready to start their family. So, you just assume it's going to happen according to plan. But that wasn't the case with them. They weren't able to get pregnant for quite some time, and everybody says, oh, it just takes time, but time went by and it didn't happen, and so they began making those rounds of seeing all the different doctors and going through all that process. And I know many of you may have experienced this in your family as well. But anyway, after a while it was discovered that Anna had endometriosis, and so she had to have surgery, and she had her surgery, and afterwards the doctor was like, I just feel sure that within 6 months you're going to be pregnant, So 6 months go by and longer, and she's still not pregnant, and then I don't know, after a while, at some point, we get a call, and they're on their way to the emergency room because she's pregnant. They hadn't told us, but she's having a miscarriage. And it's just so hard to see your kids go through these things. And all the while, of course, all of her friends are having babies, and she's hosting baby showers and all of that. And so somewhere along about this time, I heard about a youth rally somewhere. And the speaker at this youth rally was talking about evangelism, and he was talking about John 3:16, and he was encouraging the young people in the audience. And you know how they say millennials, whatever they're called, don't wear watches. They all use their cell phone, right, for time. So he encouraged them to take their cell phone and set the alarm on their cell phone for 3:16 every afternoon. And when that alarm went off, to stop whatever they were doing and to pray for someone who needed the Lord in their life. And I just loved that. I thought that was such a great idea. And so I decided that I was going to adapt that idea. And so I set the alarm on my phone every day for 4:06 in the afternoon. Because one of my favorite verses is Philippians 4:6. It says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. And so every day, when my phone went off, no matter where I was and what I was doing, I stopped and I prayed that Anna would have a baby. Not that I wasn't already praying for that, but ladies, there's just something about praying at a specific time, praying every day for a specific circumstance that is so powerful. And I wanted to be like the widow that we read about in Luke chapter 18. And you remember that story that Jesus said she kept going back to that judge every day. And finally, because she was so persistent, what happened? He granted her request. Well, so time went by, and it was Mother's Day 2013, okay? And so my mom was still living. This was actually her last Mother's Day. But so the kids had come in, and so we just had a great Mother's Day. We went out to eat, and then we came back to the house, and Mother was opening her presents first, and then I opened my presents. And the very last one that I opened was from Lana and Craig. It was a beautiful little bracelet, and it had engraved on it Philippians 4:6. And I loved it. I was so touched by that and so excited about it. And so I was about to gather up all the bags and the tissue paper and everything and throw them away. And Anna said, there's something else down in that bag. And so when I looked down the very bottom of it, it was a picture of an ultrasound picture of a baby. And she was expecting, and so later on that year, 9 days before Christmas, Miriam. And so I told the story a couple years later. I was speaking at a church outside of Birmingham about prayer, and so I shared this story. And so shortly after that, we were in Nashville for the last Leaders Convention. And one of the ladies from that Birmingham church came up, and I happened to have Miriam with me, and I was carrying her. And this lady came up to me and said, "Is that your answered prayer?" And it is. It's my answered prayer. And of course, here she is now. She's got a baby brother. And y'all, I never want to be accused of showing prejudice to any of my grandkids, so I'm going to show you the others. Okay? These are the two that live in Virginia. And these are the two that live in Huntsville, okay? So just in case you ask, you saw all of them, right? Now, I'm not saying that you can pray and get everything you want, because we know that doesn't happen, does it? Sometimes, our prayers are answered with what we want, and sometimes they aren't. But let me just encourage you to keep on praying. Even when you feel like you're hitting a brick wall with your prayers, pray. And if you can't do anything else, I want you to pray the prayer that never fails. Now, how many of you in here have read the Mitford series by Jan Karen? Anybody? I know Jan's reading it. Okay. This is a great series of books if you like to read. But anyway, and there's probably like about, 10 or 12 of them. But and it's about a little preacher in a small North Carolina town and about his church and his community. But in the first book, or maybe even the first two books, there would always be a part where he would just be, just didn't know where to turn, and he would say, well, I'll just pray the prayer that never fails. And I would think, well, I wonder what that is, And then later on he'd say it again, the prayer that never fails. And then finally, he got to a point in the book where it tells you what that prayer is. And you can find it in Matthew 6:10 as the model prayer, or also in Luke 22:42 when Jesus is praying in Gethsemane. And it's, thy will be done. And that is the prayer that never fails. When we don't know what to ask, and so many times we don't, we can pray. And we should pray, Lord, thy will be done in this hard and difficult situation. Now, several years ago, there was a movie out called War Room, and some of you may have seen that. It was really good, and it was the story of a woman who fought for her marriage and fought for her family through prayer. And she actually made a closet in her house into a place where she could go and pray, and so it was just really powerful. Well, so we had a craft night at church, because we talked about how most of us didn't have a closet clean enough, and that's a lesson for another time, okay? All our stuff. But anyway, we didn't have a closet that we would dare get in and try to pray, something would fall and hit us on the head. But one of our ladies at Stony Point had the idea to make a prayer board. Okay, and I brought mine. It's over here on this table tonight. You should look at it. It's just kind of like a little bulletin board. And I made it, and I put it beside my sink. My sink where I drop my contact all the time, like I don't know last week. No, I put it there beside where I get ready. So it's a great reminder. And I have my prayer list. And I added last week the name of the card that I drew. Added that person on there to pray for them. So anyway, I just brought that to share with you, maybe to encourage you to have a special place to pray, or maybe make you a board. And also, while I'm talking about this, Jan wanted me to mention, we did, a couple of weeks ago, we filled out those cards and we drew so that we could be praying for one another. And so, right up here, Jan's got some more cards tonight. If you did not have an opportunity to write down a prayer request, and we said you don't have to put your name, then you can do that tonight. Or maybe you've had something come up in your life that you would like for someone to pray for. You can do that and drop it in the basket, and then we can draw, and somebody will be praying for you about it. And let me just say one more thing while I'm talking about prayer.